Hello, welcome to the channel Y Stories. Enjoy watching.
I was standing behind a tree, watching my own funeral where my husband was walking arm in arm with my secretary, having taken over my business. But I had prepared such a surprise for them, one that would wipe the smirks right off their faces. Hello, my dear ones. Put your things aside for a moment. I want to tell you a story that might make you look at your loved ones in a new way. Let us know where you're watching from. Wishing you a pleasant listening experience. I stood behind a tree at the cemetery and couldn't believe my eyes. My own life had turned into some absurd play, and I had become its unwilling spectator. The damp autumn wind rustled the branches of the old oak I was hiding behind, while the first heavy drops of rain began to fall from the sky. How symbolic! Nature itself seemed to weep with me, reflecting the storm of emotions I was struggling to contain. The northern cemetery was on the outskirts of the city where I had lived all my conscious life. Those neat rows of headstones and fences, the tiled paths between graves, they had always been just another element of the cityscape, something I occasionally glimpsed from my car window as I drove by. Who could have thought that one day I'd stand here, drenched to the bone, watching them bury me? My husband Esteban was leading the procession, tall, well-groomed, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. He had always known how to dress. Once, that was one of the things I loved about him. Now he was holding my secretary's arm, and, incidentally, my best friend's, Catalina. Her chestnut hair was neatly styled, and her slender figure was wrapped in a sleek black dress I had helped her choose at a sale last year. For business meetings, she'd said back then. Well, a former boss's funeral is a kind of business meeting too, isn't it? Catalina dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief in a show of grief, but even from that distance I could see there were no tears. Esteban, meanwhile, put on his best mournful face, but his eyes betrayed him. They weren't sad, they were calculating, scanning the crowd. I wondered if he was taking note of which business partners had shown up. Who might still be willing to work with him now that he was the inconsolable widower and sole owner of my Aura of Beauty store chain? 12 locations across the city, contracts with European suppliers, a loyal customer base. All of it is now. But the hardest thing to bear was seeing my Luciana. My 10-year-old daughter walked between her father and Catalina, and her tears were real. She was wearing a dark blue dress with a white collar, the one I'd bought her for the new school year. One small hand clutched her father's, while the other held my framed photograph to her chest. In that photo, taken last summer at our country house, we were hugging under an old apple tree. Luciana was smiling, and I was kissing the top of her head. That photo used to sit on her nightstand. My sweet darling, if only you knew that your mother is alive. Every part of me ached to run to her, to hold her, to wipe away her tears and whisper that everything would be all right. But I couldn't. Not yet. Behind my family walked a line of colleagues, business partners, and half-familiar faces. Many of them were surely there out of idle curiosity, others, to confirm that I was truly gone. What a beautiful coffin, I heard someone say through the noise of the rain. Oak, hand-carved. Rosario deserved nothing less. It was Blanca, the manager of one of my stores. A woman who never missed a chance to flatter me to my face and criticize me behind my back. Now she didn't even bother to hide her admiration for the craftsmanship of my coffin, discussing it with another employee. Cemetery etiquette, my foot. I'd heard such conversations countless times over the years, false condolences, feigned sorrow, all hiding calculation and cold curiosity underneath. Now all of it came crashing down on me. In the coffin, as I already knew, lay some poor drowned woman whose body had been found in the river a week after my disappearance. The identification had been purely formal, of course. What did it matter that the body was too water damaged to be recognizable, if my grieving husband and devoted friend were both certain it was me? Even my old pickup truck had been found on the riverbank, another piece of evidence to support the suicide story. That truck had been more of a keepsake, a memory of my father, who'd loved it more than all 4 of his wives combined. Esteban had always mocked my sentimentality, suggesting we scrap the old thing and buy a new car. Who could have guessed that my faithful old wreck would become part of this grotesque performance? Convenient. Calculated. I pulled my hood tighter as a trickle of cold rainwater slid down my neck. The old jacket Faustino had lent me was soaked through, but I couldn't leave. Something made me stay and watch to the end. It had been exactly 2 weeks since that evening when Esteban suggested we celebrate our anniversary on the bridge over the river. Luciana had stayed home with the nanny, and we were supposed to go out for dinner. But first, he said, he wanted to show me the place where he'd proposed. Back then, 11 years ago, I was so in love that I would have accepted his ring anywhere, on a rooftop, and a supermarket, it didn't matter. The bridge had seemed romantic, the city lights shimmering in the dark water below. A cliched scene. A romantic evening, champagne, the bridge lights, and then a blow to the head as I gazed at the water. The last thing I remembered were his eyes. Cold. Alien. Strangely, I wasn't even surprised. Deep down, I had known for a long time that Esteban had changed. Or perhaps he had always been that way, and I simply refused to see it. He thought he had killed me, and he would have, if the current hadn't carried me to the riverbank, where Faustino found me half dead. It's strange how fate works sometimes. One decision, one coincidence, and everything changes. If Faustino hadn't gone out that night to paint his landscape, I really would be lying in that oak coffin right now. And now I stand here, my face hidden under the hood of an old jacket, watching my own funeral. The bruises haven't fully faded yet. Yellowish patches linger on my cheeks and beneath my eyes. My hair is cut short. It made it easier to treat the wound on my head. The haircut's clumsy but done with care. Like after summer camp, he joked back then, and I hadn't understood the joke, because I remembered neither camps nor my childhood. A grimace of pain twists my face with every sudden movement. But I'm standing. I'm breathing. I'm alive, unlike my reputation and my former life. How did I end up here? Chance. Pure chance, if you can call it that, when fragments of memory suddenly resurface and you make an impulsive decision to return to the city and uncover the truth. Just this morning, I didn't even remember my name or my past. And now, before my eyes, the final act of a play unfolds, one in which I've already been written out of the script. An elderly woman approached the coffin. It took me a few seconds to recognize Esteban's mother, Consuela. My mother-in-law had never been fond of me, believing her son could have found a better match. Too businesslike, she used to say about me, barely bothering to hide it. Now she stood there, leaning on her cane, not crying, just staring at the coffin with a detached expression. Beside her stood my older brother Mauricio. He had flown in from Buenos Aires, where he worked as a military doctor. We hadn't seen each other for nearly 2 years. He'd been meaning to visit, but somehow never found the time. And now he stood at my grave, hunched as though under the weight of guilt. I barely restrained myself from calling out to him. How I longed to tell him everything. But I couldn't trust anyone, not until I found out who else was part of this conspiracy. The priest began the requiem, and melodic church chants spread over the cemetery. In recent decades, church ceremonies had come back into fashion, especially among the wealthy. My parents had never been particularly religious, like most of their generation. But my generation had lived through different times. Esteban always liked to keep up with trends, even in grief, even in false grief. The rain grew heavier, and I wrapped myself tighter in my jacket. The cold made my old scars ache, reminders of that car crash 3 years ago when Luciana and I had somehow survived. That was when I first noticed Esteban's strange reaction to our survival. He had seemed disappointed? No, that couldn't be. Probably my imagination. Or maybe not. Standing at my own grave now, I was beginning to see many things differently. I needed to see it all to the end, to see the faces of everyone who came, to remember. And then I'd start to act. Because while they were lowering into the ground a coffin that, to me, was empty, I was already making a plan that would turn their celebration into a nightmare. As my grandmother used to say, dig a pit for someone else, and you'll fall into it yourself. Or her other favorite, no matter how long the rope twists, it always has an end. Esteban had dug a whole graveyard for me, but now it was his turn to fall into the abyss, and I would make sure he did. The coffin began to descend slowly into the grave. Luciana sobbed harder, burying her face in her father's coat. Catalina stroked her back mechanically, her gaze fixed somewhere far away. They were already dividing my inheritance in their minds, my life, my child. I didn't yet know where I would start, but I knew exactly how it would end, in court. And when that moment came, I wanted to see their faces, especially Esteban's, when he realized that the drowned woman had returned from the dead for one reason only, to bring justice. Meanwhile, I kept standing in the rain, my hand clenched around the small ruby ring in my pocket, my grandmother's ring, the only thing that still connected me to my past. The one I'd been wearing when I woke up 2 weeks ago in an unfamiliar house, not even remembering my own name. My grandmother had given me that ring back in '86, before I entered university. For luck, she had said. Apparently, my kind of luck was peculiar. People began to disperse. Esteban was helping Luciana into a black SUV. Catalina followed, briskly talking on her phone. Business doesn't wait, even on the day of your former boss's funeral. It was time for me to leave too. I cast one last glance at the freshly dug grave, turned, and slowly walked toward the cemetery gates, where Faustino's old pickup truck was waiting for me. Tomorrow would be the beginning of my new life. A life of a ghost, one who came back for justice. 2 weeks earlier, the forest cabin. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was a wooden ceiling with dark, time-worn beams. Somewhere above, a steady dripping sound echoed. Drip, drip, drip. Rain? Or water leaking from a faucet? Strange shadows floated before my eyes, making it hard to focus. The air smelled strongly of herbs, mixed with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and damp wood. My head felt like it was splitting open, as if someone had hammered nails into my skull. Every heartbeat sent a dull ache radiating through the back of my head. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't obey. It felt alien, unresponsive. "Please, don't move," said a deep male voice from somewhere nearby. "You've got a serious concussion and hypothermia. You need rest." A tall man in his 50s appeared in my field of vision, broad-shouldered, with graying temples and steady gray eyes beneath thick brows. His withered face, the firm line of his jaw covered with light stubble, and the fine wrinkles at the corners of his eyes all spoke of a man accustomed to life outdoors. In his hands, he held a steaming mug, the rich aroma of real, stovetop coffee wafting toward me. "Where am I?" My voice sounded hoarse, almost alien, as if I hadn't spoken in days. "In my house. Well, my grandfather's house, actually. I only live here in the summer and fall," he said, sitting down on the edge of the bed and carefully bringing the mug to my lips. "Try to drink a little. It'll help." The hot liquid burned my throat but somehow cleared my mind. I looked around. A small room with wooden walls covered in faded floral wallpaper, the kind that had been fashionable in the 70s. My grandmother's country house had similar ones, though hers had daisies, not the little bluebells I saw here. A massive wooden bed beneath me, a worn dresser with yellowed photographs in simple frames, and an old woven rug on the floor, the essence of rustic comfort. In the corner, a small icon rested on a shelf under an embroidered towel. "I found you on the riverbank 3 days ago," the man continued, seeing that I was starting to come to my senses. "You were unconscious, covered in bruises, barely breathing. It's a miracle you didn't drown. I used to be a medic, a field doctor in the army, so I was able to give you first aid. But I was going to call for help as soon as we got a signal. Cell service here is terrible, and there's no landline." I tried to remember how I ended up in the river, but my memory was shrouded in fog. Worse yet, I realized with horror that I didn't even remember my own name. Who was I? Where was I from? What had happened to me? The questions came in a rush of panic, and I clutched the edge of the blanket. "What's my name?" I asked, my heart pounding up into my throat. The man frowned, the wrinkles on his forehead deepening. "You don't remember?" I tried to shake my head and immediately regretted it. The room spun before my eyes, and nausea rose in my throat. "You didn't have any documents on you," he said after a pause. "Your clothes were soaked through. There was only a napkin from some restaurant in your jacket pocket. And this." He handed me an old ring with a small ruby set in tarnished silver. "It was on your finger." I took the ring, turning it over in my hand. The stone caught a slant of sunlight from the window and flared with a deep crimson glow. Something about it stirred a faint memory, a flicker of recognition that vanished instantly, like the trace of a dream you can't quite recall upon waking. "I'm Faustino," the man introduced himself. "Faustino Ramirez. Former military, served in the 80s. Now, let's just say I live freely. An amateur painter." He nodded toward the easel by the window, where an unfinished landscape stood, an autumn forest lit by the setting sun. I tried to sit up again, more slowly this time. Faustino helped me, sliding a pillow behind my back. Only then did I realize I wasn't wearing my own clothes, just a long flannel shirt, clearly a man's, reaching almost to my knees. "Sorry about that," Faustino said awkwardly, noticing my glance. "Your clothes were soaked and filthy. I did what I had to do, as a medic, nothing more. Your things are over there." He gestured toward the radiator under the window, where some wet rags hung drying, all that remained of what must once have been a woman's suit. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." Over the next few days, Faustino cared for me like a child. Twice a day he changed the bandage on my head. It wasn't until the third day that I found the strength to make it to the bathroom and see, in the cracked mirror, a huge scrape and a carefully treated cut at the back of my head. He brought me herbal infusions. "Grandmother's remedies for all ailments," he would say with a half smile. "This one, with mint and lemon balm, calms the nerves," he explained, handing me another steaming mug. And this one, with rose hips and thyme, good for strength. My granny could heal a whole village with her teas. Better than any pills. Those brews smelled like my childhood, though I couldn't remember why. There was something in them, in their tart scent, their bitter edge, that evoked vague associations with warmth, safety, comfort. A woman in a white apron, laying out dried herbs on the table. Grandmother? Mother? I couldn't recall. When the fever finally broke and the dizziness became less frequent, Faustino started taking me on short walks, first to the porch, then around the house. He supported me by the elbow, moving slowly, matching his steps to my unsteady pace. I should probably report this to the police, he said one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Someone must be looking for you. Family, friends. A strange unease seized me, inexplicable, irrational, but so strong I gripped the railing with both hands. No, please, not yet. Faustino looked at me attentively, without judgment, just curious. Are you afraid of someone? I don't know, I admitted honestly, trying to untangle the knot of hazy feelings inside me. But something tells me not to rush. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I'm afraid that might not be entirely right, legally speaking. If something happened to you, if someone attacked you, give me a few more days, I pleaded, until my memory comes back. I feel like it's important. He agreed to wait, though I could tell the decision troubled him. Faustino was a man of principle. You could see it in everything about him, from his upright posture, a remnant of military discipline, to his habit of rising precisely at 6 each morning. On the 7th day, I stepped beyond the yard for the first time. The small wooden house stood at the edge of a forest, surrounded by a low, time-worn picket fence. Old fruit trees with gnarled trunks, a modest vegetable patch with late-season crops, a shed stacked with firewood, a typical countryside homestead, maintained more out of habit than necessity. All around, silence. Not a soul in sight. Only Faustino's old pickup, faded to an indeterminate grayish blue, hinted that we weren't completely cut off from the world. The nearest village is 5 kilometers away, Faustino explained, noticing where I was looking. It's called El Pinar, but only 5 houses there are still lived in. Just old folks left, the young have all gone to the city. The city's about 20 kilometers from here. What city? I asked eagerly, clinging to every detail in hopes that it would spark something in my memory. San Miguel, he said, naming the regional center. I have an apartment there, but in summer and autumn I prefer it here. The quiet, the air, no rush. Perfect for painting. Something stirred inside me. That city, I knew it. I was certain of it. Vague images flickered through my mind, a wide street lined with palm trees, a fountain in the central square, buildings with tall columns. I rubbed my temples, trying to hold onto the vision, but it slipped away. 3 days later, as we were returning from another walk, the rain began. Cold drops quickly turned into a downpour, and we ran toward the house, but still got drenched. Faustino lit the stove, and soon warmth spread throughout the rooms. I sat wrapped in a blanket, staring into the fire. When I was a boy, Faustino said, tossing another log into the stove, my grandmother would always make hot chocolate on nights like this, with milk and cinnamon. He went to the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs. The aroma of childhood, warm, sweet, and comforting, enveloped me, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my cheeks. What is it? Faustino asked, alarmed. I don't know, I whispered. It's just this chocolate. It reminded me of something good and lost. He sat beside me and awkwardly put his arm around my shoulders, for the first time in all those days. His broad, work-roughened hand rested gently against my back, surprisingly tender. It'll come back, he said firmly. Your memory will come back. You just need time. For me, that time began with you, I said quietly. You saved my life, in every sense. He blushed, as he always did when I mentioned what he'd done. Anyone would have done the same. No, not anyone, I shook my head. And it's not just that you pulled me out of the river. You helped me come back to life, to myself. You showed me there's another way to live, other values. In the evenings, we sat in his studio, attached to the house. Faustino would paint while the old radio played Latin American songs, romances and ballads from years gone by. I would hum along, amazed that I remembered every word, though I still couldn't remember my own life. See? Not everything's lost, Faustino smiled. Memory comes back in fragments. Music sticks deeper in the brain than names or faces. He was joking, but there was truth in his words. Those songs, their melodies, their lyrics, were part of me, part of my generation. They felt like the soundtrack of a life I could no longer recall. Faustino painted me. At first secretly, when he thought I didn't notice. Then, after mustering the courage, he asked me to pose. He said there was a whole story in my eyes, one he wanted to capture. Eyes with a secret, he called the work. You have well-kept hands, manicured, he remarked once as I sat by the window for him. And your posture, it's refined. You're clearly not someone who's spent a lifetime working in a field or a factory. Office work, perhaps? Or maybe you're a teacher, a doctor? I looked at my hands, searching them for clues, but saw only unfamiliar fingers that stirred no recognition. The nails were neatly shaped, with traces of pale polish. On the ring finger of my left hand was a faint lighter band, the mark left by a ring. A wedding ring, perhaps. Was I married? Did I have children? The questions buzzed in my mind, unanswered. In the evenings, we played chess. I didn't remember the rules, yet my hands seemed to know what to do. Muscle memory, Faustino explained. The body remembers what the mind forgets. That gave me hope. On the 10th day of my stay in Faustino's house, I had my first true memory. We were drinking coffee from an old porcelain set Faustino had taken out of the cabinet especially for me, delicate cups with elegant handles, painted with blue flowers. My grandmother's, he said proudly, from the 1950s, brought from the capital. I treasure it. My mother only used it on special occasions. I lifted the cup with the blue flowers to my lips, and suddenly, the image flashed before me with startling clarity. A little girl with two tight chestnut braids sits at a table covered with a spotless white cloth. Across from her, a middle-aged woman with a tired but kind face pours coffee from the very same porcelain set. Careful, Luciana, the coffee's hot, the woman said. Luciana, I whispered, feeling a lump rise in my throat. What? Faustino looked at me in confusion. Luciana, I repeated louder, tears spilling down my cheeks. My daughter. I have a daughter. Her name is Luciana. Faustino stared at me, unable to hide his joy. You see? I told you. The memory always comes back. She's about 10, maybe 11, I went on breathlessly, afraid to lose this precious thread of remembrance. She has chestnut hair, freckles on her nose. She loves to draw. And she loves strawberry ice cream. I stopped. The memory had vanished as suddenly as it came. But its trace remained, a warm glow in my chest, tenderness, love for the little girl whose face I could now clearly picture. If you have a daughter, then someone must be looking for you, Faustino said, frowning. We really should go to the police. I nodded, but something inside me still resisted. Let's wait another day or two. Maybe I'll remember more. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. My heart raced with the thought that somewhere out there was my daughter, maybe searching for me, or maybe mourning me. Why hadn't anyone found me? What had happened on that bridge? Why did I end up in the river? An accident? Or something else? And who was I? The sound of rain on the roof woke me the next morning. The sky outside was gray and damp. Faustino had already lit the stove and was cooking breakfast, eggs with tomatoes and herbs from his garden. I'm running low on supplies, he said, pouring coffee into the cups. We'll have to drive into town. We can stop by the police station while we're there. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of fear and hope. At last, I would learn who I was. We set out after lunch. The old pickup groaned over every bump, but kept trudging along the rain-soaked road. Good thing I've got chains in the back, Faustino said. Just in case. Easy to get stuck around here. By the time you find a tractor to pull you out. I half listened, staring out the window at the autumn landscape sliding past. Yellow and red trees, faded fields, a leaden sky. Everything looked both familiar and foreign at once. As we got closer to the city, the road improved, and the pickup rolled along more easily. I began to study the roadside signs, trying to see if any of them stirred recognition. One after another they passed. El Pinar, 3 kilometers, Santa Rosa, 12 kilometers, San Miguel, 8 kilometers. Maybe you'll remember something when you see the city, Faustino suggested. Familiar places, familiar streets. I nodded, my hand tightening around my grandmother's ring in my pocket. The city greeted us with drizzle and the glow of evening lights. Faustino first stopped at a supermarket to buy groceries, then said, Maybe we should drive through the center first? See if anything jogs your memory. We drove slowly through the main streets. Something faintly familiar flashed here and there, the theater building, a park with a large fountain, a square with a monument. But nothing clear, nothing that told me who I was. There's the police station, Faustino nodded toward a 2-story building with a flag out front. Shall we go in? I was about to agree, and then my eyes caught on a newspaper stand at the corner, or rather, on the headline displayed behind the glass. Farewell to Rosario Esquivel, to be held Wednesday at the Northern Cemetery. Below it, a photograph of a woman. My photograph. Stop, I whispered, clutching the dashboard. Faustino hit the brakes. What is it? That newspaper, I pointed with a trembling finger. Look at the photo. He followed my gaze, first to the stand, then to me, then back again. His eyes widened. Good Lord, he muttered. That's you. I was already out of the car, running toward the kiosk. My fingers shook as I dug coins from my pocket, paid for the paper, unfolded it. Tragically deceased, well-known businesswoman and owner of the Aura of Beauty cosmetics chain, Rosario Esquivel. The body was discovered in the river a week after her disappearance. According to preliminary reports, the incident appears to have been an accident. I leaned against the wall of the newsstand, my knees threatening to give way. Rosario Esquivel, I said slowly, tasting the name. That's me. My name is Rosario. Faustino caught me by the elbow, helping me stay on my feet. So they think you're dead? His voice trembled with shock. But how? Why? I looked at the newspaper again. Wednesday. Farewell on Wednesday. Today was Wednesday. The article listed the time, 11 a.m. It was just after 10. We have to go, I said, feeling a strange, feverish urgency rise within me. To the cemetery. Right now. Faustino didn't ask any questions. He simply drove me to the Northern Cemetery and stayed in the truck at my request. I pulled the hood of his old jacket over my head and went toward the place where they were about to bury me. That's how I ended up behind a tree at the cemetery, watching my own funeral and piecing together new details of my life from the faces of those who came to say goodbye. The answers came suddenly and violently, like a thunderstorm after a suffocating summer day. They didn't just think I was dead. They wanted me dead. And now I knew who. The drive back to the forest cabin was silent. Faustino didn't ask a single question, and I was grateful for that. Only from time to time did he glance at me, worried, when he thought I wasn't looking. The rain drummed steadily on the truck's roof, the wipers squeaked across the windshield. The monotonous rhythm soothed my frayed nerves. Inside my head, memories were coming together piece by piece, like shards of a broken mirror. Now that the dam had burst, they flooded back in a torrent, overlapping and colliding until it almost hurt physically. I remembered meeting Esteban at the launch of a new cosmetics line in 1998. He was a young, ambitious lawyer, freshly graduated with honors. I was a beginner entrepreneur with a tiny shop in a basement on the city's outskirts. How gallantly he courted me, how easily he charmed my mother with his impeccable manners, how confidently he spoke about our future. I remembered our wedding in 2000, modest but traditional. My parents were just recovering from the financial crisis, so there was no money for extravagance. But we were so happy, so full of faith in the bright future ahead. I remembered Luciana's birth in 2003, the happiest day of my life. That tiny bundle with soft wisps of hair and little fists. And Esteban, the proud new father, standing outside the hospital with a huge bouquet of roses. I remembered my first real business success, opening the second store downtown. How Esteban supported me, helped with the legal side. How the chain slowly grew, third store, fourth, fifth. And I remembered how everything began to change. About 3 years ago, Esteban started to grow distant, coming home late, snapping over trivial things. I blamed it on stress, on the so-called midlife crisis. I didn't have much time for family either. The business demanded my constant attention, especially once the economy started to wobble. And then came Catalina. She'd been recommended by Esteban himself. Energetic, competent, with experience in a big company. You need a good personal assistant, darling. You'll burn out at this pace. I remembered how they grew close without me even noticing, buried as I was in endless work. Business dinners, joint trips to conferences, long evening phone calls. Work matters, darling. You know how important this contract is. And I remembered that night on the bridge. Esteban had been unusually tender, attentive. He suggested we celebrate the anniversary of our first meeting. 11 years since the first time I saw you, remember? Of course I remembered. I melted at his sudden romantic gesture. Agreed to leave Luciana with the nanny and drive to this special place. The bridge over the river, Champagne, the lights of the city shimmering on the water. Look how beautiful it is down there, he said, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. I leaned over the railing. My fingers instinctively touched the back of my head, feeling for the scar. Are you all right? Faustino's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned to him. We were already home. The pickup stood by the gate. He was watching me with concern. Yes, I said, though it was far from true. Just remembering. He nodded silently and helped me out of the car. The drizzle had turned into a steady downpour, and, sharing his old raincoat between us, we ran toward the house. Under different circumstances, it might have been funny, two grown-ups dashing through the rain like schoolchildren, but there was no laughter now. Inside, Faustino lit the stove and brewed coffee. He set a jar of dark ruby jam on the table, wild raspberry, picked by his own hands. At another time, I would have savored its taste, the taste of childhood. But now I could think of only one thing. Luciana. My daughter, I said, looking straight at Faustino. I have to go back to her. He frowned. After what I've seen, it might be dangerous for you to return. She's with him, I said, unable to bring myself to say Esteban's name. With the man who tried to kill me. And with that woman. Faustino was silent for a moment, thinking it over. We could go to the police. I gave a bitter smile. And tell them what? That I rose from the dead? That my husband tried to kill me? I have no proof. And he has the perfect alibi, friendly witnesses, the right connections. He'll say I slipped, that he tried to save me, or that I'm confused after a head injury. But you're alive, Faustino objected. That's proof enough. Proof of what? That I survived an accident? I shook my head. No, the police won't help, not yet. Not until I have something more solid. Then we need to find proof, Faustino said firmly. Evidence, witnesses, something to back up your story. I thought for a moment. If Esteban had planned to kill me, there had to be traces. Financial records, maybe. Insurance? Something that would reveal his motive. I need to get into our house, I said. There might be documents there, something that could prove his guilt. Faustino looked doubtful. That's dangerous. If he sees you. I'll go when no one's home, I said firmly. Esteban always works late. And Luciana, my voice faltered. She's probably with my mother. After everything that's happened, he must have sent her there. I remembered that my mother lived in the neighboring town, about an hour's drive away. She had always been Luciana's safe haven, especially when Esteban and I fought. And how will you get into the house? Faustino asked. You don't have the keys. I smiled faintly. There's a spare set, hidden in the backyard, under the old lemon tree. Just in case. Faustino looked like he wanted to argue but then just nodded. When do you want to go? Tomorrow. In the morning, Esteban will definitely be at work. And today? Today I need to make a plan. Figure out what to do next. That night I barely slept. Fragments of memory kept spinning in my mind, fitting together into a single picture. Over the past year, my company had grown significantly. We'd opened 3 new stores and signed an exclusive contract with a European cosmetics manufacturer. Esteban, as my lawyer, had access to all the documents. And as my husband, he was my heir. A perfect coincidence. And Catalina, how could I have been so blind? Those accidental touches whenever Esteban passed by her desk. Those glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. Those business trips they returned from strangely energized. We left early in the morning. I was quiet, focused. Faustino didn't try to make conversation, and I was grateful. He understood I needed space to think. We parked a few blocks from my house, a 2-story villa in a prestigious neighborhood. I didn't want to risk leaving Faustino's old truck right in front of the gate. I'm coming with you, Faustino said as I opened the car door. I shook my head. No. If someone sees us together, it'll draw attention. I have to go alone. He frowned but didn't argue. Instead, he handed me an old cell phone with a cracked screen. Take this. If something happens, call me. I'll be right here. I took the phone and quickly walked toward the house, keeping close to the fences and hedges for cover. The day was overcast, a light drizzle falling, perfect weather for going unnoticed. On a day like this, people hurry to their destinations, never looking around. When I reached the house, I didn't go in right away. I stood across the street, staring at its familiar shape. White walls, a tiled roof, a tidy front garden with chrysanthemums, the last flowers of autumn. The house Esteban and I had bought 7 years ago, when business had started to flourish. We'd poured so much of ourselves into it, every corner planned, every detail loved. And now I stood before it as an intruder. A ghost. There was no sign of Esteban's car in the driveway. He must have already left for work. I circled around to the back of the house, slipping through the small gate in the fence that we always left unlocked for the gardener. The backyard greeted me with neglect, fallen leaves everywhere, flower beds choked with weeds. It had only been 2 weeks, yet the house already looked abandoned. I found the hiding spot under the old lemon tree, a hollow at the roots, covered with a piece of bark. The keys were still there, wrapped in the same bit of oilcloth I had left them in. My heart pounded as I approached the back door. I slid the key into the lock and froze. There was a sound from inside the house. Someone was there. I jumped back and ducked behind a bush. Who could it be? Esteban, back early? The housekeeper? A thief? The door opened, and Catalina stepped out. My loyal secretary. My friend. My husband's mistress. His accomplice. She looked flawless, as always, an elegant business suit, perfectly styled hair, understated makeup. In her hands, a folder of documents. She shut the door, checked the lock, and walked briskly toward the gate. I pressed myself deeper into the bush, barely daring to breathe. She passed just a few feet away, without noticing me. I could even smell her perfume, French, expensive, the very one I had once recommended to her. These will suit your type, I told her back then. When her footsteps faded, I waited a few more minutes before carefully approaching the door again. I unlocked it with my key and stepped inside the house that had so recently been mine. Inside, everything looked almost exactly as I remembered. Almost. A few details were missing: the photos of me from the mantel, my favorite throw on the couch, the vase I'd brought from Italy. As if they'd started erasing me from this space, carefully, bit by bit. I crept into Esteban's study, a strict, masculine room with a heavy oak desk and a leather chair. This was where he worked from home, where he kept his most important documents. The safe was hidden behind a painting. Cliché, but practical. I knew the code, his mother's birthday. Esteban had always been more attached to her than to anyone else. I opened the safe. Neat stacks of papers. Insurance policies, property deeds, contracts. I began leafing through them quickly, searching for something suspicious. And I found it. A life insurance policy in my name, taken out 6 months earlier. A large sum, payable in the event of my death. The sole beneficiary, Esteban Esquivel. There it was. The motive. I took several photos of the document with Faustino's phone, then kept searching. In a desk drawer, I found a folder with our company's logo. I opened it and froze. It was a restructuring plan for the company, with a new management chart listing Esteban as CEO and Catalina as commercial director. I wasn't on it, at all. They had planned everything long before the accident. They'd been preparing, waiting for the right moment. I started photographing those documents too, when suddenly I heard the sound of the front door opening. My heart stopped. Someone had entered the house. I quickly shut the folder, returned it to the drawer, closed the safe, and hung the painting back in place. I scanned the room, no sign I'd been there. Hopefully. I crept to the steady door and listened. Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, deliberate. A man's. Esteban. But why was he home so early? Panic surged through me. I had to get out, now. But how? Not through the front door, he'd see me. The back door? Risky. I'd have to pass through the living room, and he could walk in any second. That left the window. Luckily, the study was on the ground floor. I carefully unlatched it, trying not to make a sound. Cold autumn air rushed in. I swung one leg over the sill. Who's there? Esteban's voice came from dangerously close. I froze. Had he heard me? My heart pounded so loudly it felt like it must echo through the entire house. The study door began to open. I threw myself outside, almost diving through the window. I hit the wet ground hard but didn't stop. I ran toward the fence without looking back. Hey, stop! Esteban shouted from the window. He'd seen me, but had he recognized me? I didn't dare turn around to find out. I vaulted over the low fence and sprinted away, darting between neighboring yards, desperate to disappear as quickly as possible. Only after running several blocks did I stop to catch my breath. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling. But most importantly, I had the evidence. Now I knew for sure. It hadn't been an accident. It had been an attempted murder. And I was going to set things right, whatever it took. Did he see you? Faustino asked anxiously, studying my face as we drove back to the forest cabin. The old pickup jolted on every pothole, but that was the least of our worries. I don't know, I said, nervously twisting the edge of my jacket between my fingers. He saw someone jumping out the window. But did he recognize me? I doubt it. I was wearing a hood, and my hair looks completely different now. The short haircut Faustino had given me after the injury had changed my appearance drastically. Gone were the long locks down to my shoulders, now there was just a rough, uneven crop, with faint traces of dried blood still visible. Any woman would have been horrified by such a look, but for me, it was the perfect disguise. This changes things, Faustino muttered, frowning at the road ahead. If he starts suspecting something. So what? I smirked. Will he go to the police and tell them the ghost of his dead wife broke into his house? Or that some burglar took pictures of insurance documents instead of stealing jewelry? I took out the phone and scrolled through the photos. The quality wasn't great. The old phone's camera was far from perfect, but the text was readable. A life insurance policy worth $500,000, issued 6 months before the accident. A reorganization plan naming Esteban as CEO and Catalina as commercial director. A preliminary contract with a foreign investor ready to inject funds into the business, all signed by Esteban as heir and legal successor. A perfect motive for murder. So what now? Faustino asked as we approached his house. Dusk was already settling. The autumn day was giving way to evening. Now I need a good lawyer, I said, clenching my fists with determination. Someone brave enough to go against Esteban. Someone who'll help me get justice. Do you know anyone like that? I hesitated, running through the names of lawyers I knew. Most of them were somehow connected to Esteban, shared cases, shared interests, shared secrets. Who could I possibly trust? Josefina Barrera, I said at last. She handled my cousin's divorce a few years ago. Tough, principled, and most importantly, no ties to Esteban. Faustino nodded. You know how to contact her? Her office is downtown, near the main square. But we have to be careful. If Esteban suspects anything, he might start watching her. Maybe you could call her first? Faustino suggested. I shook my head. You don't discuss things like this over the phone. No, I need to see her in person. And I know how. The next morning, we headed back to the city. But this time, I was better prepared. I wore clothes Faustino had picked up from a thrift shop, a plain gray coat, a dark headscarf, and his old glasses with clear lenses to complete the look. It would be hard for anyone, even someone who knew me well, to recognize me now. We parked not far from the law office where Josefina worked. I asked Faustino to wait in the car while I walked toward the unremarkable building that housed her practice. The receptionist, a young woman with heavy makeup, glanced up at me indifferently. Is Ms. Barrera seeing clients? I asked, keeping my voice lower than usual. By appointment only, she replied without looking up from her manicure. She has an opening next Thursday. This is urgent, a matter of life and death. Everyone says that, she sighed, clearly bored. Please schedule an appointment like everyone else. Please tell her I lowered my voice to a whisper. That Rosario Esquivel is here. It's very important. The girl froze and looked up at me, her eyes widening slightly. She stared at my face for several seconds, then swallowed hard. Rosario Esquivel is dead. It was on the news. That's exactly why I need to speak with Josefina. Immediately, I said, leaning closer. Tell her I have information about the Esquivel case. She'll understand. The receptionist hesitated, then finally pressed a button on the intercom. Josefina, there's a visitor here. She says she has information about the Esquivel case. Urgent. There was a few seconds of silence from the speaker, then a sharp, commanding woman's voice replied. Let her in. The secretary nodded toward the office door, and I walked in, my heart pounding in my chest. Josefina Barrera was exactly as I remembered her, a tall, lean woman in her 60s with short graying hair and piercing gray eyes. Impeccably dressed in a tailored dark suit, minimal makeup, long, elegant fingers with a precise manicure. Once, she had been one of the city's top prosecutors. Now she had the reputation of a defense lawyer who never lost a case. Have a seat, she said, gesturing to a chair while studying me closely, and explain why you're using the name of a dead woman. I removed my glasses and headscarf, straightened up, and looked her directly in the eyes. Because I am Rosario Esquivel. Barrera froze. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she quickly regained her composure. An interesting claim, considering that Rosario Esquivel was buried 3 days ago. You do realize that impersonating another person. I'm not impersonating anyone, I interrupted. I am Rosario Esquivel. The woman in that coffin isn't me. I'm sitting in front of you because my husband tried to kill me, and failed. Now I want justice. Barrera leaned back in her chair, her gaze sharp and unwavering. Let's assume for a moment that you really are Rosario Esquivel. Do you have any proof that your husband tried to kill you? Yes, I said, pulling out the phone and showing her the photos. Here's the insurance policy he took out 6 months before the accident. Here's the company reorganization plan, without me. And this, a preliminary contract with a foreign investor, set to finalize after my death. She studied the photos carefully, then looked back at me. How did you survive? I told her everything, the blow on the bridge, waking up in Faustino's house, the amnesia, the slow return of my memories. I told her about the funeral, the break-in, and the documents I found. She listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in a small notebook. You realize your story sounds incredible? She said when I finished. I do. But I have a witness, Faustino Ramirez, the man who found me and took care of me. I have evidence of collusion between Esteban and Catalina. And I have a daughter, a little girl who's now living with the man who tried to kill her mother. My voice trembled on the last words. Josefina, I know you specialize in complex cases, and I'm ready to pay for your work. I have personal savings Esteban doesn't know about. Barrera tapped her pencil against the desk, thinking. What you're proposing isn't just complex, it's a legal labyrinth. You've been officially declared dead. Another woman was buried under your name. Your assets have likely already been transferred to your husband. And you don't yet have irrefutable evidence of attempted murder, only circumstantial proof. But you'll take the case? I leaned forward, searching her face. She was silent for a moment, then gave a decisive nod. I will. First, because I believe you. And second, because this will be the most interesting case of my career. A heavy weight lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in 2 weeks, I wasn't alone against the world. Where do we start? I asked. Barrera opened her planner and flipped through the pages. First, we prepare the groundwork. We'll need irrefutable proof that you are who you say you are, medical records, a DNA test, witness statements from people who know you well enough to recognize you despite the changes in your appearance. But if Esteban finds out I'm alive, he won't, the lawyer said firmly. At least not right away. We'll act through trusted people. I know a doctor in a private clinic who can run the DNA tests discreetly. I have contacts in the forensic department of the police. We'll assemble a file that no one will be able to dispute. And then she paused. I want my daughter back, I said firmly. That's the most important thing. Of course. But to do that, we'll need to prove not only that you're alive, but that your husband tried to kill you. Otherwise, he'll keep his parental rights. She frowned thoughtfully. We'll need additional evidence. Was anyone else there that night on the bridge? Did anyone see you? I tried to remember. It was late. The bridge was almost empty, I said finally. I think there was a homeless man there. He was sitting on a bench not far from where it happened. Esteban gave him some money to make him leave, but maybe he saw something. Good, Barrera noted in her pad. We'll find him. What else? Catalina, I said, clenching my fists at the sound of her name. She must know about Esteban's plans. There might be proof, messages, calls. Excellent thinking, the lawyer nodded. We'll keep an eye on her too. And we'll also need to find out who the woman was, the one buried under your name. That could give us more clues. We talked for nearly an hour, working out a strategy. When I was about to leave, Barrera suddenly asked, Where are you staying now? You need a safe place. With Faustino, I replied. At his cabin in the woods. No one will find me there. She nodded, though I caught a flicker of concern in her eyes. Be careful, and keep your phone on you at all times. I'll call every night at 9. If you don't answer, I'll raise the alarm. I thanked her, put on my disguise, and left the office. The secretary watched me curiously but said nothing. Faustino was waiting in the truck, just as we'd planned. When he saw me, his shoulders relaxed visibly. Everything went well? Better than I expected, I said, smiling as I got in. Josefina's taking the case. We have a plan. He started the engine, and we drove off. I told him everything, about my conversation with the lawyer, the steps we'd outlined, the hope that justice might finally be possible. You're very brave, Faustino said quietly when I finished. Not brave, I corrected him. Just left with no choice. My daughter is with the man who tried to kill me. I have to protect her. He nodded, eyes fixed on the road ahead. I'll help you, any way I can. You already have, I said, touching his hand. You saved my life, gave me shelter, strength. Without you, I wouldn't be here. We drove in silence after that, each lost in thought. Outside, autumn painted the world in gold and crimson, wet roads, gray skies, glistening leaves. The world was both beautiful and terrible at once. In the days that followed, the real work began. Josefina moved fast and efficiently. Her assistant, a young man named Rodrigo, arrived at the cabin with a DNA collection kit. It's for comparison with your personal belongings left in the house, he explained. A hairbrush, a toothbrush, anything with your biological traces. We'll collect them discreetly and run the match. Rodrigo also brought a professional camera and photographed my injuries, especially the scar on the back of my head. These would become part of the medical evidence file. And one more thing, he said while packing his equipment. Josefina found the homeless man. His name's Marcelino. He's been living under that bridge for years. And he did see something that night. What exactly? I froze. He saw a man hit a woman on the head and push her off the bridge. Then he got into his car and drove away. Marcelino didn't interfere. He was scared. But he remembered both the man's face and the license plate number. It was our first real victory. We had a witness. Maybe not the most reliable one in the eyes of the court, but someone who'd seen what happened. That was already something. During those days, Faustino became my anchor. He drove me to secret meetings with Barrera's contacts, helped gather information, supported me whenever despair crept in. And in the evenings, we'd sit by the fire, drinking coffee and talking about everything: life, the past, the future, our hopes and disappointments. I learned that he had fought in the war back in the 80s, been wounded, and lost many friends. That he'd once been married, but the marriage had collapsed. His wife couldn't bear his nightmares or sudden bursts of anger, echoes of old trauma. That he had turned to painting as therapy, and it had saved him from self-destruction. The cabin we lived in had belonged to his grandfather, a forest ranger who had taught him to love nature and find solace in it. And he learned my story, how I'd started my business with a single small shop, survived the economic crises, celebrated my daughter's birth, and slowly drifted away from my husband, consumed by work. How I hadn't noticed when love turned into habit, and habit into indifference. You know, I said one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset, sometimes I think this was a strange kind of salvation. Yes, Esteban wanted to kill me, but maybe it had to happen, so I could finally wake up. So I could see that I wasn't really living my own life. Faustino looked at me with surprise. You think he did you a favor by trying to kill you? I laughed. Of course not. He's a criminal and has to answer for what he did. But that's not what I mean. I mean that sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what truly matters. He nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes fate chooses strange paths to lead us where we're meant to be. That night, I dreamed of Luciana. She was standing by the window in my bedroom, clutching my photograph to her chest and crying. I woke up in tears, my heart pounding. Faustino heard me, came from the next room, sat beside me, and wrapped his arms around me. We'll get her back, he promised. You'll be with your daughter again. You'll see. And I believed him, because I had no other choice, because belief was all I had left. 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Josefina worked with the precision of a seasoned investigator, methodically gathering evidence. Her team tracked Esteban and Catalina, documenting their movements, collecting every scrap of information. Faustino and I stayed in the cabin, going into the city only when necessary, for meetings with Josefina and her people. In that time, I changed a lot. Not just on the outside, though my hair had grown a little, the bruises faded, and I'd begun to regain weight after weeks of barely eating. Something deeper had shifted inside me. It was as if the old Rosario Esquivel had truly died on that bridge, and someone new had taken her place, stronger, sharper, more real. You smile more often now, Faustino said one day as we walked through the forest, gathering the last autumn mushrooms. Really? I asked, surprised. That's strange, considering everything that's happening. He shrugged. Maybe it's because you're no longer playing a role. You don't have to be the successful businesswoman, the perfect wife, the flawless mother. You can just be you. His words lingered with me. Had I really been playing a role all that time without realizing it? Maybe my old life, the endless chase for success, profit, social approval, hadn't been truly mine at all. Maybe I'd just been trying to fit someone else's expectations, losing myself in the process. But my thoughts were interrupted when Josefina called that evening. We've had a breakthrough, she said without preamble. We found out who the woman was, the one buried in your place. I sat down on the edge of the bed, gripping the phone tighter. Who was she? A homeless woman, Josefina said. She'd been living on the streets for the past few years. Valentina Mendieta, a former music teacher. After her husband died, she started drinking, lost her apartment, ended up homeless. Her documents were destroyed in a fire at the shelter where she sometimes stayed, so identification was complicated. But how did she end up in the river the same night Esteban tried to kill me? That's the interesting part, Josefina's voice hardened. We found a witness who saw Mendieta being forced into a car by 2 men around the same time you were on that bridge. One of them matches your husband's description. A chill ran through me. Could Esteban have planned the body switch in advance? That meant it wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity, it was premeditated murder. There's more, Josefina continued. We traced Esteban's financial activity over the past 6 months. several large cash withdrawals with no stated purpose, and most intriguing of all, a payment to a private investigator 3 months ago, one known for taking questionable jobs. You think that investigator helped organize the murder? It's very possible. We're trying to locate him, but so far he's disappeared, left the city suddenly. I told Faustino everything after the call ended. He listened in silence, then pulled me into a tight embrace. That means we have proof, he said quietly. We can bring him to justice. But I wasn't convinced it was over. Something inside me whispered that we still didn't know the whole story. All evening I couldn't rest, going over the events of the months leading up to the accident. And then it hit me. The car crash, I exclaimed, jumping from my chair. What crash? Faustino looked at me in confusion. 3 years ago, Luciana and I were in a car accident. Our driver suddenly lost control on an empty highway. The car skidded off the road into a ditch. We barely survived. At the time, I thought it was just bad luck, a mechanical failure. But what if it wasn't? What if it was the first attempt? Faustino frowned. You think Esteban tried to kill you back then too? I'm not sure, but it's too much of a coincidence. Especially since he insisted we take that particular driver, even though we usually used another one. The next day I told Josefina about it. She immediately launched an investigation. We'll find that driver, she promised. We'll see what happened to him after the crash. And then, just a day later, the thing I both feared and longed for happened. Josefina called with news. Your daughter is in the hospital. My heart dropped. What happened to her? I could barely speak. Nothing too serious, just acute food poisoning. But they admitted her to the children's hospital for observation. Esteban is with her now. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I have to see her. That's exactly why I'm calling, said the lawyer. This is our chance. Esteban can't stay with her all the time. He has a business meeting tonight with investors that he can't miss. The girl will be with a nurse. We can arrange a brief visit. That's dangerous, Faustino interjected. He'd been listening to our conversation. If anyone recognizes Rosario, there's a risk, Josefina admitted. But my contact at the hospital says the nurse on duty tonight is new. She doesn't know the situation. And Rosario looks different enough now that strangers won't recognize her. I didn't hesitate for a second. I'm going. I need to see my daughter. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and medicine, that familiar, timeless hospital smell. Faustino and I walked down a long corridor past the nurse's station, where a plump woman in a white coat was dozing over her paperwork. No one paid us any attention, just another pair of visitors among many. Luciana's room was at the end of the hall. Josefina had given us precise directions, the third door on the right after the treatment room. Your daughter's alone now, she'd said. Her roommate was discharged this morning. I froze at the door, unable to bring myself to enter. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure its beating echoed through the corridor. I'll wait here, Faustino whispered, squeezing my hand. If something happens, I'll signal. I nodded and gently pushed the door open. Luciana was lying on the bed by the window, pale and thin, with an M4 in her arm. She was staring outside, not noticing me at first. On her bedside table lay my photograph, the same one she'd held at the funeral. Luciana, I whispered softly. She turned. Her eyes widened in disbelief. For several seconds she just stared at me, frozen. Mom? She breathed at last. Is that you? I walked closer and sat on the edge of her bed. Yes, sweetheart, it's me. But Dad, everyone said you were dead. Her voice trembled, tears welling up. I was at the cemetery, I saw it. It was a mistake, darling, I said gently, taking her hand in mine, afraid to startle her. I'm alive. I just got hurt, lost my memory. But now I'm back, and I'll never leave you again. She threw herself into my arms, sobbing. I held her tightly, feeling how thin, fragile, and impossibly dear she was. My child. My treasure. I missed you so much, she sobbed. I was so scared I'd never see you again. Dad said I had to be strong, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. It's all right, I whispered, stroking her hair. I'm here now. I'm right here. Are you coming back for good? She asked, pulling away slightly to look into my eyes. Will we live together again? I hesitated, not knowing how to explain everything to a 10-year-old girl. Soon, sweetheart. Very soon. I just have to take care of a few things first. But I promise, I'll never leave you again. Is it because of Dad? She asked suddenly, surprising me with her perceptiveness. Did you two fight? Why do you think that? Luciana lowered her eyes. I heard him talking to Aunt Catalina. They thought I was asleep. Dad said something like, "Now that she's gone, we're free." And they laughed. Then they kissed. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself not to show my rage. "And how long have they?" "I don't know," she shrugged. "I saw them together a couple of times before you disappeared, but I didn't think it meant anything. After the funeral, Aunt Catalina started coming to our house a lot. She even stays overnight sometimes." She grimaced. "She sleeps on your side of the bed." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. It wasn't the time for anger. My daughter mattered more than revenge. "Listen to me carefully, sweetheart. You mustn't tell anyone you saw me. Not Dad, not Aunt Catalina, not the doctors. It's very, very important. Can you promise me that?" She nodded solemnly. "I promise. Is it like a secret mission?" I smiled. "Yes, something like that. I just need to take care of some things first. Very soon I'll come back for you. We'll be together again." "And that man who brought you, is he nice?" she asked suddenly. I turned and saw Faustino standing in the doorway, checking that everything was all right. "Yes, he's very kind. He helped me when I was in trouble. I couldn't have made it without him." Luciana nodded seriously. "He looks like one of those good heroes from the movies. Remember the ones we used to watch?" I laughed through my tears. "Yes, something like that." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Faustino gave me a warning look. "I have to go, darling," I said quickly, kissing Luciana on the forehead. "But I'll come back for you. Soon. I promise." She hugged me tightly one last time. "I'll wait for you, Mommy. And I won't tell anyone you came. It'll be our secret." I slipped out of the room, tears streaming down my cheeks. Faustino put his arm around my shoulders, and we hurried toward the exit, trying not to draw attention. Only once we were in the car did I finally let go. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed uncontrollably. "I have to get her out of there," I gasped between tears. "She can't stay with them." Faustino pulled me into his arms, letting me cry against his shoulder. "We'll get her back, but we have to stick to the plan. Otherwise, we'll ruin everything." I knew he was right. We couldn't risk it, not now, when we were so close to the truth. "I couldn't bear it if anything happened to her," I whispered. "She'll be fine," Faustino said with quiet certainty. "It's not in Esteban's interest to hurt her. She's his insurance, his proof of normalcy. As long as she's with him, everyone sees a grieving widower, a devoted father. It's the perfect cover." He was right, and that thought calmed me a little. At least for now, Luciana wasn't in immediate danger. But the anxiety gnawed at me constantly, never letting go. "It'll all be over soon," Faustino said, starting the engine. "Josefina has nearly everything she needs. Just a little longer." I wiped my tears and nodded. Yes, it'll be over soon. And I believed it, believed that justice would prevail, because I couldn't allow any other ending. After seeing Luciana, everything began to move at dizzying speed. Josefina called again. She had found the driver who'd been behind the wheel during that old accident. Nicholas Velasquez had been tracked down in a small town up north, where he'd moved right after the crash. "He's agreed to testify," the lawyer told me over the phone. After the accident, Esteban offered him a large sum of money on the condition that he leave the city and never contact you again. "So it's true," I whispered, sitting down on the edge of the couch as my legs nearly gave way. "He tried to kill us even back then. But why? 3 years ago he didn't have Catalina yet, no plans to take over the business." "There was an insurance policy," Josefina said firmly. "We found one taken out 6 months before that first accident. Very similar to the recent one, just for a smaller amount. It seems he simply got unlucky that time. You survived. And after that, he lay low, waiting for the right moment," Faustino added, sitting beside me. "Then Catalina appeared, and she became the catalyst for his new plan." I remembered how Esteban had insisted I hire Catalina as my personal assistant. "She's very competent, has excellent references," he'd said. Of course she did. He'd written those references himself. Maybe they'd already known each other back then, maybe they were already lovers. And I, buried under endless business matters, had noticed nothing. "We need to move on to the next stage," Josefina continued. "We've gathered enough evidence to file an official report with the police. But to make the greatest impact, we have to catch them off guard, give them no time to cover their tracks." "What do you propose?" Faustino asked. "A trap," she said, her voice cold and precise. "Esteban mustn't know you're alive until the very last moment. We'll prepare all the documents, coordinate with trusted officers in the police, and then strike when they least expect it." "When?" My voice trembled slightly. "In 2 days. At the launch event for your new cosmetics line. Esteban and Catalina will both be there, presenting the company as its new executives. It's the perfect moment for a dramatic reveal. I hesitated. The presentation at the Grand Palace Hotel had been scheduled back when I was still running the company, months before the accident. We'd arranged a deal with a European manufacturer for an exclusive product line, spent a fortune on advertising. All our partners, clients, and the press would be there. The perfect stage for a public reckoning. And what about Luciana? I asked, thinking first and foremost of my daughter. She's still in the hospital, but she's due to be discharged tomorrow. She won't be at the presentation. Good. I didn't want her anywhere near the moment her father was arrested. Do you have a clear plan? Faustino asked, always the practical one. I do, Josefina replied. A detailed one. Tomorrow I'll come to you, and we'll go over every step. The next day passed in tense preparation. Josefina arrived with folders full of documents, photographs, witness statements, the entire case file against Esteban and Catalina. We went over the plan again and again, rehearsing every possible scenario. The key, Josefina emphasized, is not to give them a chance to escape. The moment they realize you're alive, they'll try to run. I'm certain Esteban has a backup plan, offshore accounts, fake identities, something ready for emergencies. I nodded. That was exactly like Esteban, always with a plan B. What will happen to the company when this is over? I asked. Josefina shrugged. Legally, it should revert to you as the rightful owner. But will that even matter to you now? I thought about it. Just a month ago, my business had been the center of my world, the reason I got up every morning. I'd poured my soul into it. But now, it felt distant, almost meaningless. My daughter, her safety, justice, that was all that mattered. I'm not sure, I admitted. Maybe I'll sell it. Start something new. Faustino silently squeezed my hand. He understood. That evening, after Josefina left, Faustino and I sat on the porch, watching the full moon rise over the forest. It was eerily still, no wind, no birdsong, only the occasional crackle from the dying embers in the stove. Are you afraid? He asked quietly. Yes, I said honestly. I'm afraid something will go wrong. That Esteban will slip away again. Then I won't be able to protect Luciana. He put his arm around my shoulders, pulling me closer. It's going to work. You're stronger than you think. You know, I said, turning to look at him, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know, these weeks here with you, they were real. Maybe the most real thing in my whole life. He didn't say a word. He simply leaned in and kissed me, gently, without hesitation. And that kiss said more than any words ever could. We left early in the morning. Josefina had arranged a meeting with a police investigator she trusted 1 hour before the presentation. We were to show him all the evidence and secure official authorization to arrest Esteban and Catalina right there, in the ballroom of the Grand Palace Hotel. The city was damp and cold. November had taken full hold, bare trees, wet asphalt glistening under the streetlights, and the few passers-by huddled in their coats and jackets, hurrying about their business. No one paid any attention to the old pickup slowly making its way through the central streets. Investigator Ramirez turned out to be an older man, weary but sharp-eyed, with gray at his temples. He listened to our story without surprise, as if accustomed to hearing the most improbable twists of fate. There's enough here to open a case, he said after reviewing the documents. Witness testimony, financial trails, forensic evidence. But for an arrest, we'll need to make sure the suspects don't have time to flee or destroy evidence. The operation must be swift and unexpected. We discussed the plan in detail. Ramirez called in 2 trusted officers and briefed them quickly. Then we headed to the Grand Palace Hotel. The presentation was scheduled for 6 o'clock. We arrived half an hour early to take our positions. I was so nervous my fingers trembled as I adjusted the scarf on my head. Everything will be fine, Faustino whispered, squeezing my hand. We're here. The hotel's grand ballroom was filled with people, elegant women in evening gowns, men in tailored suits, waiters carrying trays of champagne flutes. Soft music, dim lights, the polished luxury of the decor, everything spoke of status and money. Faustino and I took a spot in the back corner, trying to blend into the crowd. I looked around carefully, recognizing many faces, business partners, clients, journalists. Some of them had attended my funeral. Josefina, Investigator Ramirez, and the 2 officers positioned themselves closer to the stage, ready to act at my signal. We didn't have to wait long. Exactly at 6, Esteban stepped onto the small stage. Impeccable, as always, expensive suit, perfect hair, confident smile. Catalina followed him, elegant in a black dress, her new haircut framing a string of pearls around her neck. My pearls, the ones Esteban had given me for our 10th wedding anniversary. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Esteban began, sweeping the room with his confident gaze. Thank you all for joining us on this special night. Special, because today Hora de Belleza opens a new chapter in its story. He paused, lowering his voice slightly, giving it that calculated tone of sincerity. Many of you knew and respected the founder of our company, Rosario Esquivel, my wife, who tragically passed away a month ago. Her work was her passion, her life's creation. And today, Catalina and I, as the new leadership team, wish to honor her memory by continuing what she began. I clenched my fists, feeling the heat of anger rise in me. What hypocrisy! What shamelessness, to speak of honoring the woman he himself had tried to kill. The new cosmetic line we're presenting today, Esteban continued smoothly, was conceived during Rosario's lifetime. She poured her heart into this project, and though she didn't live to see it completed. Are you sure about that? I said loudly, rising from my seat and pulling off my scarf. Esteban froze mid-sentence. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward me. I began walking slowly toward the stage, my heart pounding. Are you sure I didn't live to see it completed, Esteban? I repeated, moving closer. He went white as a sheet. Catalina gripped the edge of the table, as if to keep from collapsing. Gasps rippled through the audience, someone even screamed. Rosario Esteban whispered, stepping back. But how? You're dead. Not quite, I said with a cold smile. Though you certainly tried your best, didn't you? On the bridge and 3 years ago in that accident. The problem is, I survived. And I came back to see justice done. Esteban quickly regained his composure. His expression hardened. You're insane. What accusations? What accident? You're confused. Your injury must have affected your mind. The injury you caused, I replied calmly, stepping closer. A blow to the head to knock me out, then into the river. Very efficient, especially with a convenient body ready for substitution. Poor Valentina Mendieta, what did she ever do to deserve that? Esteban paled even more. He hadn't expected me to know about the body switch. This is nonsense, Catalina shouted, finally finding her voice. She's delusional. Call security. No need, Josefina said, rising from her seat. Security already knows. So does the police. Investigator Ramirez and his officers were already moving toward the stage. Esteban Esquivel, Catalina Sokolova, Ramirez announced in a firm, official tone, you are under arrest on charges of attempted murder, large-scale fraud, and falsification of documents. Esteban made a sudden movement, as if he intended to run, but one of the officers was already beside him, ready to stop any attempt. You can't do this, he shouted. It's a mistake, a misunderstanding. But they were already leading him toward the exit, reading him his rights. Catalina followed with her head bowed, offering no resistance. The hall buzzed with excitement. Journalists' cameras flashed, guests whispered, pointing at me in disbelief. Some tried to ask questions, others just stood frozen, mouths open. Faustino came up to me and took my hand. Are you all right? I nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over me. It was done. Justice had been served. Now I could finally think about the future. Let's go get Luciana, I said. It's time to take her home. 6 months later. Spring sunlight flooded the wide veranda. I sat in a wicker chair, watching as Luciana and Faustino planted the first flowers in the freshly turned garden beds. My daughter laughed brightly while Faustino showed her how to press the soil gently around the fragile sprouts. His large, strong hands moved with surprising tenderness for a man his size. A lot had changed in 6 months. After Esteban and Catalina's arrest came months of court hearings, interrogations, expert reports, and witness statements. I was at the center of it all, but no longer alone. Faustino was always there beside me, calm, reliable, unwavering. Esteban broke down during the third interrogation. Once he saw the weight of the evidence, he realized denial was pointless and started talking, hoping for a lighter sentence. He confessed to planning my murder, how he'd found a woman with a similar build, how he'd paid 2 ex-convicts to stage her death and dump her body in the river. Catalina wasn't as strong. She confessed almost immediately, shifting all the blame onto Esteban. It was his idea, she kept sobbing at every questioning. I just loved him and did what he asked. Not very convincing, considering the documents found in her apartment outlining plans for the company's reorganization, dated long before my disappearance. The court sentenced them both to lengthy prison terms, 12 years for Esteban, 8 for Catalina. Justice was done. But I didn't feel joy, only exhaustion and emptiness. Too much deceit, too much betrayal, all within such a short time. Aura de Beleza survived the scandal surprisingly well. After the initial shock, clients and partners rallied around their resurrected founder. The story was everywhere, newspapers, TV, online. Back from the dead, revenge from beyond the grave, businesswoman versus her murderous husband. The headlines competed in sensationalism. My face was on every screen. Reporters camped outside the house, offering obscene sums for exclusive interviews. But fame no longer interested me. I sold my controlling stake in the company to a longtime business partner, keeping only a small share and a seat on the board. The proceeds secured a future for Luciana and me, and gave us a chance to start anew. Our new home stood not far from Faustino's old forest cabin, a spacious but modest wooden cottage in an eco-friendly style, with a wide veranda and a plot that bordered the woods. The air always smelled of pine and freshness. Breathing here felt easy. Luciana adapted to our new life surprisingly fast. Of course, it wasn't easy for her to process everything that had happened. For the first few weeks, she often woke at night crying from nightmares, asking why her father had wanted to kill us. I never knew what to say. How do you explain to a child that sometimes greed and selfishness can eclipse even love? The school psychologist we consulted advised honesty, without cruelty. Your father did something very bad, we told her gently, and now he's paying for it. With time, Luciana stopped asking about her father. She threw herself into her new world, new friends, new hobbies, new beginnings. And then there was Faustino. Surprisingly, this former soldier, a man who had survived war, loss, and despair, proved to be endlessly patient and kind with Luciana. He never tried to replace her father or force closeness, he simply was there. He taught her how to fish, to build bird feeders, to tell which berries and mushrooms were safe in the forest. Slowly, she grew attached to him, began to trust him. Look, Mom. Luciana's voice broke through my thoughts. We planted crocuses and daffodils. Faustino says they'll start sprouting in a week. I smiled, looking at her soil-stained hands and rosy cheeks, glowing in the spring air. My girl. My treasure. The most important thing I had left. Wonderful job. I praised her. When you're done, wash your hands. Lunch will be ready soon. Faustino caught my gaze and smiled, warm, a little shy. Even after 6 months together, he sometimes looked at me as though he still couldn't believe this was real, as if he half expected me to wake up one morning and say, well, that's enough of our country life, time to go back to the city, to the real world. But I wasn't planning on going anywhere. For the first time in many years, I felt I was exactly where I belonged. No endless race for success, no corporate intrigues, no need to constantly prove my worth. Here, in this house, with these people, I could simply be. That evening, after Luciana had gone to sleep, Faustino and I sat on the veranda wrapped in a blanket. Spring nights were still cool. Red wine shimmered in our glasses, and an old record player filled the air with soft jazz, Faustino's small secret indulgence, known to few. What are you thinking about? He asked, noticing that I'd been staring off into the distance for several minutes. About life, I smiled. About how strange it all is. 6 months ago, I was standing behind a tree in a cemetery, watching my own funeral, not knowing if I'd survive, or if I'd ever see justice done. And now? He covered my hand with his. Now I understand that everything that happened, as terrible as it was, brought me here. To real life. To you. To this house. To the chance to start over. He nodded thoughtfully. You know, my grandfather had a favorite saying, if you dig a pit for someone else, you'll fall into it yourself. When I was a kid, I never really understood it. But now I think, there's truth in it. If you walk the right path, with clean intentions, there's always a way out, even from the darkest trials. For me, that way out was you, I said softly. You saved my life, and every sense. He looked embarrassed, as always when I spoke about what he'd done. Anyone would have done the same. No, not anyone. I shook my head. And it's not just that you pulled me out of the river. You helped me come back to life, to myself. You showed me that there's another way to live, with different values. We fell silent, listening to the soft music and the crackling of the fire. In moments like that, words weren't necessary. It was enough just to sit together, to feel each other's warmth, to know you wouldn't face tomorrow alone. I have something for you, Faustino said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small box. I was waiting for a special occasion, but I think every evening with you is already special. He handed me the box. Inside lay a simple ring, no elaborate design, just a small sapphire set in a modest silver band. It's not a diamond, he said, rubbing his neck shyly. A soldier's pension doesn't stretch that far. It's beautiful, I whispered, feeling tears rise in my eyes. The most beautiful ring I've ever seen. Then he took my hand, looking straight into my eyes. Rosario Esquivel, will you marry me? I laughed through my tears. Yes. Of course, yes. We stayed up talking late into the night, making plans for the future, a small, simple wedding with only our closest friends, maybe moving farther from the city, to a real village. Faustino had long dreamed of his own small farm. Summer holidays with Luciana by the sea. A trip to Italy, where I'd always wanted to go but never found the time because of work. And in the morning, we were awakened by Luciana bursting into the room with a joyful shout. Mom! Faustino! The crocuses have sprouted. Come see! We went, sleepy, happy, still in our robes. We watched as the first green shoots pushed through the dark soil, promising blossoms soon, new life, new hope. See, Luciana, said Faustino, putting an arm around her shoulders, it's always like this in nature. After the longest winter, spring always comes. And after the hardest trials, brighter days follow. I looked at them standing by the flower bed, at the sunlight breaking through the morning mist, at the little green shoots stubbornly reaching toward the light. And I thought, maybe that's the real lesson of my story, never give up. Never let evil win. Believe that after the darkest night, dawn will always come. I once stood behind a tree in a cemetery, watching my own funeral, not knowing what awaited me. And now I stood at the doorstep of a new home, a new life, a new love. And this journey, with all its pain and hardship, had been worth it. Mom, Luciana ran up to me, grabbing my hand. Faustino said you're getting married. Is it true? I nodded, smiling. Yes, sweetheart. If you don't mind, of course. Don't mind? She laughed. I was hoping you would. You love each other so much, even a hedgehog could see that. Faustino came up to us and wrapped his arms around our shoulders. My clever girl, he said with a smile. You really are like a little hedgehog. You see everything, notice everything. The three of us stood there, arms around each other, watching the awakening spring forest, the pale blue sky, and the tiny green shoots pushing through the dark soil, ready to bloom into bright flowers. A new life, a new family, a new beginning. And it was the perfect ending to a story that had begun behind a tree in a cemetery. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to click like and subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to keep bringing you new and captivating stories every day. We wish you all the best, happiness, warmth, and light in your life.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.